guest would have to wear a flannel shirt.
Matching, not clashing. Okay, Will, Mr. Sarni, how you doing? And should I say welcome to the very first edition of The Stream. How are you?
I am well, which these days means that family is healthy, safe, and employed. So, in terms of priorities, yeah.
Absolutely. I think during this, a lot of people are calling it unprecedented pandemic. So I think if you can say that, your family's healthy, you're able to work, you're healthy, these are our priorities have shifted, right?
Well, I clearly, if we're fortunate, this is a realignment of priorities. And, I think I mentioned this to you previously, that in January, I was concerned about my United 1K status. Not that was the highest priority, but in terms of things that were bothering me, it's a distant memory now, and I could really care less.
I think such a crisis, it puts into perspective what were perhaps first world problems, right? And actually confirms what things really matter to people. But let's come on to the you don't want to dwell on the United 1K issue for a while? No, I'm going to dwell on that. I'm going to come back to it. I'm not going to let you off that easily. But let's for people who've just perhaps tuned in and listened, why are we doing this? There's a lot of podcasts out there, a lot of video, a lot of Zoom chats. So I'm going to throw to you first. Why did we decide to kind of do this? Video cast, also doubling as a podcast, and then perhaps I'll chip in on why The Stream as the name.
Sure. Well, I think there's a need in the marketplace, despite all the noise and everyone pushing out content, either video or webinars and so on, to have a different take on the market. And I think the two of us come at the world of water differently, but very much aligned in terms of we have a bias for action. We want to solve problems. We don't want endless conversations. I dare say, I think we're optimists, not prima donnas. I think we all are grounded in reality. However, we do believe we can solve water, and we want to get things done. And I think the combination of your background and perspective and sort of where you touch the world of water meshes really nicely with what I'm seeing. And, combining our relative perspectives across the pond, so to speak, I think is valuable.
I think you're right. And we wanted to create something where it has a note of optimism. You mentioned the phrase glass half full. And I think that's important, because people want to listen to perhaps things that we've seen or people we've spoken to that are providing stories of hope and optimism and how they're innovating around the current situation. And I think, it is a completely unprecedented pandemic. I'm trying to limit the amount of times I'm looking at the news to once a day for the main news, because to start with, during the first couple of weeks, it was becoming overbearing, and I was getting completely obsessed with the numbers of different countries, and I think it was a bad habit to get into. I think the reason we wanted to do something, we're trying to do this twice a month, right? It's just to have a kind of a look at our view on things, and almost a glimpse into the minds of Sarni and Freyberg, right?
well, there's a terrifying thought. People will now drop off this.
We've lost everyone already. I know, they've gone. That's it.
Yeah,
that's too much.
If the shirts didn't scare them, then definitely that view will. I think one thing that's pretty clear through all of this is, as a dear friend says, we're living in the solution. So what we do for a living is even more important. Not to overstate our importance, personally, but if we can stay focused on what we do and drive towards a positive change through all of this, then that's a good thing. And again, it's not ignoring reality. It's really focusing on what we can impact.
And I think, if anything, the crisis has really highlighted how critical water is, the water sector are, the people that work in water, and also perhaps highlights the vulnerabilities of communities without access to safe water, which we've talked about many times, but this really highlights that worldwide wicked problem of water that you call it, right? That's how you refer to it, the wicked challenge of water.
Yeah, water's a wicked problem.
That's articulated much better. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
I know I shouldn't laugh, but it's got a definition. I mean, it's a complex adaptive system, and no one stakeholder can solve water, but collectively we can. It's a profound challenge, and being part every day of in some small way solving water is important. And people talk about water being invisible in a way, and that first world, you turn on the tap and it's there, it's mostly safe to drink, and we typically ignore the fact that in large parts of the world, people don't have access to safe drinking water that's affordable, reliable, and the simple thing of, oh yeah, we're supposed to wash our hands all the time. Well,
right,
that is a luxury, and it's easy not to recognize that. So, doubling down on ensuring that people know that the privilege of safe drinking water out of the tap that you can use to wash your hands is not universal.
It's a primary piece of advice from governments around the world, right? Regular and thorough hand washing.
Right.
And I think even now people should appreciate that they have access to water to be able to do that, and to be able to protect themselves before the food they touch and prepare before they come into their households. Not everyone, millions and millions around the world don't have that privilege. But I saw something the other day about a South African government actually investing into temporary water supplies to enable communities without access to have access. And I thought, hopefully, post-pandemic, which we don't know when this will be, we think this may hang around for some time, that access and providing those services will continue, regardless of whether there's a vaccine in place. And this is a challenge that we as a human race have overcome.
Yeah, a lot of interesting things going on addressing that issue. We're seeing the private sector, alcoholic beverage companies, pop soda companies, really leaning in and contributing to bottling water and engaging in delivery of water within the communities where local infrastructure either doesn't exist, it's not reliable, whatever it may be. So there are some positive things that are emerging. And, you and I have talked about it in terms of community and the role of the private sector, and the recognition that if you don't invest in water infrastructure, it has no resiliency to handle something like this. And also really acknowledging, the water utility professionals that never really get exposure. I mean, those are people at the front line, in many places, sheltering in place, ensuring that the infrastructure works. So
I always refer to them as the unsung heroes. I think it's a common phrase people use, but I think now they're becoming the sung heroes, along with doctors, nurses, teachers, delivery drivers, basically underpinning society. Without these people, without the taps flowing, this could be a far worse pandemic than it's shaping up to be, right?
Right. I mean, not to run off into a political rabbit hole. Yeah. However, I think what we're seeing here in the U.S. is that really the professionals that we undervalue in terms of compensation and care and attention are the ones that are saving us. And it is, first responders, healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, firemen, policemen, water utility providers, people like that are, I think undervalued, underpaid, and invisible, are suddenly being acknowledged. Not enough, but people are paying attention. And I think this is a good segue into what's going on in Denver, which you and I have talked about.
Yes. Before we jump into that segue, let's and it was good that you stopped. In terms of going into the political rant, I know we've said we don't intend this to be too political in its nature, but let's just take a step back. Why did we call it the stream? I know we've talked about some ideas and the name. Why do we think that kind of fits with what we're doing here?
Well, I'll leave that one to you.
Okay, so I've sort of asked myself the question there.
Well,
yeah, I mean, that works as well. I've segued myself. That's totally fine.
I'm happy to dive into the stream if you want, but
yeah, I mean, I think, you've become a recognized voice and authority in digital technologies, right? As well as a corporate sustainability and corporate water stewardship world. And so we're thinking, we wanted to give it a name that taps into both of our experience in water. So stream, naturally, a stream, but also taps into the digital world. And what you do with video and audio, you can stream it. So we thought the stream would be perfect. And we thought we wanted to keep it fairly personal, right? So we thought the stream with Will and Tom would be a good kind of name and brand to build. It's a conversation between the two of us, things we've seen, and eventually we'd like to bring in guests, right, who kind of that we think we can have a good conversation with. We can put the world to rights, potentially have a little bit of banter with them as well, not getting too political, I might add. Would you say that kind of covers it in terms of why the stream with Will and Tom?
That would have been my exact answer, Tom. No, I think it's spot on. The one thing I would add is we have dynamic conversations. There's hardly anything scripted, if you will, in terms of, our conversations and brainstorming and so on. So for me, the stream is really kind of a perfect match of, something that it's got some boundaries to it, but we're going to go in directions that, are honor who we are, genuine in terms of, our values and points of view, but it's going to be pretty free flowing.
I like that, free flowing, very good. No, I think you're right. I mean, we might see a headline or a project or a conversation either one of us have had, like I said earlier, and we kind of think this would be a great topic for this edition of the stream. And I think that's important. We just keep this. It's not too scripted. It's not scheduled for the whole year. People are going to hear some very random conversations, but hopefully insightful, and we create engagement with people to comment and suggest topics and people that we can speak to as well.
Yeah, I view us as a catalyst, the ability to bring people in and different ideas. I was actually on a call before this, which was ungodly early. And, comparing notes with a colleague in Sweden in terms of, okay, so what are you seeing in the water sector right now? he spends most of his time on the technology startup side of the equation and investors, and I sort of have a foot in each one. And I think that's really important now. I mean, we can listen to all the webinars and read all the published reports, but the reality is that this is changing not every day, but every hour in terms of what's showing up and who you're talking to, and the ability to share that almost on a real-time basis, I think, is valuable. I mean, I'm getting an enormous amount from just connecting with friends and colleagues in the world of water and comparing notes and using that as a way to frame, my point of view.
I had a really interesting few conversations last week. Everyone is taking to Zoom, right? Zoom has almost become the hero of the lockdown, if you like. And we were using Zoom way before this even happened, right? So we're kind of fans of the platform. But I just wanted to know, because I heard from some utilities who are more digitally mature, you could say, that were boasting rates of 95, 96, 97% completely working remotely, with operations in the cloud, with well-defined and structured data sets. And I had a really good conversation with the Israeli utility Mekarot, and the VP of engineering said he's got a team of 70 engineers and he hasn't met them in 4 weeks. Everything has been done remotely. They're working through the challenges. They're working longer days. And so I just thought and he described it, shout out there to Yossi Jacobi, great guy. He described it as we're over the bridge. We've gone too far. I said, well, is that sustainable, in terms of water projects, delivering of water? And he said, yeah, we're over the bridge. This is, we've kind of gone too far to go back. People have adjusted to that improved work-life balance. They didn't, for now, to go back to the office 9 till 5 and spend an hour each way in traffic when they can do the same job. But then a mutual friend of ours, Dean Umhouse from the Water Council, he was kind of the opposite view. He said, we really miss that connections. We miss sitting around a table, having eye contact with people. And I guess as a matchmaker, as an incubator, they like to connect innovations to the challenges. And you really need to do that with dinners, with meetings, with having coffee with people. So I think it was nice to see those two contrasting views.
Sure. Well, I think they're probably both wrong and both right. I mean, when we come out of this, it will not be the same. And I think that, clearly this has accelerated the digital transformation of the water sector. I mean, 2 months ago, we were talking about this, sort of slow digital adoption curve. And to me, analog is dead. Analog solutions really can't deliver sustainable, resilient infrastructure. I think there are a number of challenges now, in particular, in terms of, what's affordable and some of the revenue challenges the utility sector is now facing. But yeah, I think digital is absolutely going to be a key part of any business going forward. On the other hand, of course, we miss the social interaction piece. And I think, one of the things that we're seeing here in my neighborhood in Denver is that there is a stronger sense of community, even though people are not out and about like they used to be. I mean, when people are out and about now, they are engaging with strangers at an appropriate social distance, of course, in a way that you would not have seen 2 months ago. So I think they're both right in that, yeah, the nature of work has changed and the need for community is even more important now than it was before. So what does this look like? It's undoubtedly some combination that we can't really predict, but we know it's going to be both. I don't know. That makes sense. I mean,
no, it makes perfect sense. I think the world post COVID-19 is going to be completely different. I think it's almost like the world and I hate to refer to 9/11, the world post 9/11 in terms of airport security is fundamentally different pre 9/11, right? And I think the world post COVID-19, and we don't know how long the lockdown, because as we're the time of recording this, we're currently, many countries around the world are in lockdown. How long this will go on for in terms of development of a vaccination, in terms of allowing mass social gatherings to take place. I think
Right.
All public events from the European Football Championship through to Wimbledon, through to the Olympics, have been postponed or cancelled, right? So I think in terms of getting back to that level of normality, we don't know how long it will be. So I think you're right. The world is going to be looking completely different from where we were 6 months ago.
Yeah, this is one big reboot, basically. It is, there is any notion of what was normal 2 months ago it no longer holds. So
do you think, because we've talked about this before, I've seen the phrase reboot used a few times, but also Mother Nature is having a reset, if you like. Do you think, do you agree with that? Because I wrote something for Aquatech actually, looking at 5 signs of hope. And there was some fake news circulating about, people are seeing dolphins in the Venice canals. Actually, that video is from Sardinia, not in Venice. But there were reports and videos of clearer waters in Venice canals, no tourists, less motorized boats, and actually signs of increased and improved fish life and aquatic life and plants and that sort of thing. So I think it's an analogy that's used quite commonly. Mother Nature's telling us if she wants to keep us or not, and having a reboot. But I think it's true. I mean, look, the data from NASA Earth and the images that every country that is going through a lockdown has cleaner and clearer skies now.
yes, so yeah, we need to hold on what that looks like, because I think we've forgotten. You're a master of the language, and one thing that strikes me is that people that are not in the environmental field talk about the environment as though it's something. It's not us, and we're not part of it. It is the environment, and that distance, that arm's length separation from the environment versus, me as a human ravaging the earth, says it all. So I think hopefully for me, this means that people will recognize that, we are the environment, and, our impact is pretty profound, not in a good way.
Well, every human action has an impact on the environment. We are the environment in which we live and breathe. And I remember I did a podcast interview with Mark Nelson, who is one of the original biospherians in that experiment where they had 8 individuals. And it just sparked the memory of chatting with him, because he said it was like a miniaturized Earth, and everything they did, every action had an impact on the biodome and the environment. And I think if you extrapolate that to the Earth, everything we do has a wider impact. So now perhaps that link is resonating more with people, right? So, and I think there's something else we've talked about is, and then you mentioned earlier about the corporate, the private sector, and how they're innovating really quickly. Mm-hmm. We're hearing about companies like Dyson, through to Formula One teams, through to Tesla, pivoting into ventilator production. Companies 3D printing masks within 24 hours. Some amazing stories of the private sector linking into the public sector. But how do you think, from your perception, brands should act here? I mean, do you think it's like a litmus test of their morality, almost, how they act and how they're communicating?
Oh, I think we could spend hours on that, and no surprise, I have a point of view on that. I think absolutely. I think this hopefully transforms CSR, corporate social responsibility, in that, this is a test. So what are companies doing in terms of engaging their communities, their workforce as a force for good? So, a company that has an absolutely A-rated CSR report that suddenly lays off their entire workforce and doesn't acknowledge their place in society will be remembered, I believe. And from my point of view, I'm seeing more companies actually do good. I mean, just really genuinely do good, whether it's writing a check, whether it's the ability to pivot to make ventilators or masks, whether it's contributing to food banks, delivery services. I'm actually seeing a lot of good. And it goes back to our earlier comment about, optimism and, what can we learn from this? So, yeah, I think in some ways CSR will never be the same, which I think is a good thing. It's a no longer check the box. It's, what did you do when we took the big hit? I'll buy from brands that I remember did good things.
Well, we've referred to in previous interviews about how brands and companies and CEOs, they make you feel, right? When you talk about them or when you're referencing them, do you get a good vibe, or do you kind of think keep them at arm's length because of some wrongdoings, right? And I think this exposes those companies, right? And it either increases and improves that feeling of warmth and positivity you get with the brands and how they're acting, or and I think you're right, we're seeing more of that. I'm seeing a lot more positive stories of private sector for profit companies that are pivoting, are helping out in ways that we didn't think was possible. And I think in a time of a crisis, you see people go one of two ways. You see the unity and the camaraderie and people coming together and silos being broken and healthcare and water people kind of linking to. But on the other hand, you see the kind of the toilet roll, loo paper, looting people. And some company bosses refusing to close their stores, under the argument that they're an essential service when quite clearly they're not, purely for profit over people. So I think you get the spectrum, but I agree with you. We're seeing more on the positive side, thankfully, so far.
Yeah. I'm proud of the companies that we work for, and I know just, as colleagues in the world of water, because, for me, they're doing good things. And that's important to me. And I believe ultimately to everyone. And I am really impressed with the response by the private sector in general to address these social, economic and environmental needs right now in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before. So again, it goes back to what have we learned, what will change, what will stick, and how do we move forward?
I like it. Well, I think that's a nice kind of ending segue to perhaps a sign off for the first edition, and perhaps a teaser for the second one. So what would you like to kind of say to people watching or listening or have downloaded the stream as a podcast and are on their hour a day local exercise, for people to kind of to get in touch, right? We want to deliver this as a conversation between us and water professionals, CSR professionals around the world that are just looking for kind of, I'll shoot to you. What would kind of be your, almost like the Jerry Springer's final thought? What would you say, Will?
What's my ask? Let's stay connected. Let's compare notes. let's do this together. Again, we can't solve water alone, to borrow a tagline. And I'll use a quote that actually came from my wife when I was headed out for Davos, going out the door. She said, "Do good things." And to me, that was so important as I look back on it in view of what 2020 has shaped up to be. So I would say, let's do this together. Reach out. If you agree, disagree, it doesn't matter. But, let's make sure that we're connected and we're aligned in solving our problems. And let's go do good things.
Great stuff. Perfect ending, Will. Well articulated. So I think that wraps up nicely the first episode. I think, as Will said, stay connected. If people have ideas for future episodes they'd like to chat about, even if people would like to appear on the stream as a guest, do drop us a line. And the idea is that we keep this going every 2 weeks, fortnightly. So as in both formats, there's a video to watch, as well as a downloadable MP3 podcast as well. So,
hey, Tom, can I just throw in one last thing?
As long as it's not a final curveball to kind of throw
No, absolutely not. I think
Okay.
one thing that you should consider is guests would have to wear a flannel shirt.
I think that has to be a prerequisite, right? And it cannot clash with our two flannels as well, because we've kind of, not on purpose today, but we are matching, but not. No, I think it's matching, not clashing. Right.
Oh, that is a great tagline. I love
the stream with Will and Tom, matching, not clashing.
Nice. Well, it's snowing here in Denver, so it's appropriate.
Well, there we go. The whole lumberjack vibe. Good stuff. No, I think, so guests are welcome. Lumberjack shirts are mandatory. But good stuff. All right, Will, always good to speak with you. We'll catch up in a couple of weeks. And I hope everyone listening has enjoyed what they've heard so far. And anything you'd like to hear more of or less of, please just, as usual, get in touch. Good stuff.
Sounds great.
Speak to you soon, Will. Thanks.
Take care, Tom.